They thought escorting me from the building would be the end of it. They had no idea that a simple unemployment claim, something so routine, so harmless, would become the scalpel that dissected their entire empire built on fraud. One quiet move, unexpected and unnoticed. And by the time they realized what was happening, they were already in checkmate. Sometimes the most devastating revenge doesn't come from grand gestures or public confrontations. Sometimes it comes from a single government form, filed with meticulous precision, that triggers an avalanche no one saw coming. My name is Lauren Mitchell, and after 8 years of keeping Stratison Technologies' operational processes running like clockwork, I was about to be discarded like a piece of obsolete hardware. The summons came at 3:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, that carefully calculated time when the office is too deep into the afternoon to cause a morning scene, but early enough that security can escort you out before the 5 o'clock exodus. The email was sparse. Please join Graham in conference room C. No subject line, no context, but after 8 years, you learn to read the silences. Conference room C was what we called the fishbowl glass walls on all sides. No privacy, where every termination was performed like corporate theater for anyone who cared to watch. Graham Walters had been CEO for exactly 47 days. He came from a competitor with promises of streamlining operations and maximizing efficiency, corporate speak for cutting anyone who'd been around long enough to know where the bodies were buried. I'd seen him maybe 4 times since he arrived, always surrounded by his imported lieutenants, always avoiding eye contact with anyone who'd been here longer than his tenure. I didn't knock. When you're walking to your execution, courtesy becomes irrelevant. Graham didn't offer me a seat. He stood behind the glass table, hands clasped in front of him like a funeral director, that practiced expression of regretful authority painted across his face. Behind him, Sandra from HR clutched a manila folder, my death warrant, no doubt filled with separation agreements and liability waivers. Lauren, he began, my first name sounding foreign in his mouth, like he'd practiced it phonetically. I'll keep this brief. We're restructuring the operations department. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. The words hung in the air like smoke. 8 years of 60-hour weeks, of catching errors that would have cost millions, of building processes from scratch that kept this place from imploding, reduced to corporate euphemism. Nothing personal, he added, the phrase sliding out with the ease of someone who'd said it dozens of times before. We appreciate your contributions. I could have argued, could have pointed out that I was the only one who understood the Byzantine complexity of our contractor payment systems, that I'd saved the company from 3 different audit disasters, that my institutional knowledge was irreplaceable, but Graham's eyes had already moved past me, checking his phone, mentally onto the next execution. We won't contest your unemployment claim, he said, as if granting me a favor, as if allowing me to collect the insurance I'd paid into for nearly a decade was an act of generosity. Sandra has your paperwork. Sandra slid the folder across the table. Inside, I glimpsed the standard severance package, 2 weeks' pay for 8 years of service, insurance coverage until the end of the month, and enough legal language to ensure I couldn't so much as whisper about my time here without triggering a lawsuit. Security will escort you to collect your belongings, Graham continued, already stepping toward the door. You have 15 minutes. And just like that, I ceased to exist in the Stratison universe. Graham left without another word, probably off to update his efficiency metrics, to add another hash mark to his restructuring scorecard. Sandra lingered just long enough to ensure I signed where I was supposed to sign, her sympathetic expression as genuine as a $3 bill. The security guard, Marcus, who I'd shared coffee with every morning for 5 years, couldn't meet my eyes as he walked me to my desk. Conversations died as we passed. Keyboards fell silent. The living watched the dead walk by, grateful it wasn't them, terrified it would be tomorrow. 15 minutes to pack 8 years. My personal items fit into a single banker's box, a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Employee," a stress ball shaped like a brain, 3 framed photos, and a succulent that had somehow survived the fluorescent wasteland of corporate America. I left the awards on the wall. Employee of the Quarter felt like a sick joke now. As Marcus walked me through the lobby, past the reception desk, where I'd entered fresh-faced and eager 8 years ago, Graham's words echoed, "We won't contest your unemployment claim." He had no idea what he'd just authorized. No idea that those 6 words would become the signature on his own corporate death warrant. Because Graham Walters, in all his efficiency-maximizing wisdom, had forgotten one crucial detail. I'd been the one managing payroll irregularities for 8 years. I knew every ghost employee, every inflated contractor payment, every tax discrepancy that had been carefully buried in spreadsheets and coded transactions. And unemployment claims, they require detailed employment verification. They trigger official reviews. They wake up government agencies that ask uncomfortable questions about company finances. Graham thought he was closing a chapter. He was actually opening a case file. The Seattle rain was coming down in sheets as I stood outside Stratison's gleaming tower. Banker's box growing soggy in my arms. Former colleagues hurried past. Umbrellas angled against recognition. Their careful avoidance more painful than any termination speech. 8 years. And I'd become invisible in 15 minutes. I watched them scatter toward the parking garage, toward their still intact lives, and felt something shift inside me. Not the hot rage I'd expected, not the humiliation that should have been drowning me along with the rain. Something colder, cleaner, like watching chess pieces arrange themselves on a board only I could see. My car sat in the visitor section. Security had already revoked my parking pass before I'd even signed the severance papers. Efficient. Graham would be proud. I set the box in the back seat, my world's okayest employee mug rattling against the photos, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. Rain hammered the windshield, turning the Stratison building into a wavering ghost of glass and steel. 8 years of being the good soldier. 8 years of fixing other people's mistakes, of covering for executive incompetence, of watching millions flow through channels that would make any forensic accountant weep. I'd kept my mouth shut, played by the rules, believed that loyalty meant something. Graham Walters had just taught me otherwise. The funny thing about being a process manager is that you see everything. Every invoice, every contractor agreement, every creative interpretation of tax code. You become the keeper of inconvenient truths, the custodian of corporate sins. They trust you because they have to. Someone needs to know where the bodies are buried to make sure they stay buried. But what happens when the gravedigger gets fired? I started the engine and drove home through the Seattle gloom. My mind already 3 moves ahead. Not the clumsy revenge of a disgruntled employee, no leaked emails, no dramatic accusations, no social media rants that would paint me as bitter and unstable. No, this required something more elegant, something that would appear to have nothing to do with me at all. My apartment felt different when I walked in, like I was seeing it for the first time. This was my world now, not the corner of the 32nd floor with its view of Elliott Bay, but this one bedroom in Fremont, with its temperamental radiator and neighbor who practiced violin at midnight. I set the soggy box on my kitchen counter and pulled out my personal laptop, the one IT had never touched because I'd bought it myself for professional development. Funny thing about professional development, it means you keep copies of everything, not maliciously, not with any intent beyond being thorough, but when you're managing processes, you need references, templates, examples of what worked and what didn't. 8 years of data, sitting in carefully organized folders, backed up to 3 different cloud services, because redundancy was my religion. I opened a folder labeled Contractor Agreements 2019 to 2024 and smiled for the first time since Graham had summoned me to the fishbowl. There they were, hundreds of them. Agreements for contractors who mysteriously billed 40 hours a week while supposedly being independent. Contractors with addresses that matched those of certain executives' vacation homes. Contractors who existed only as bank account numbers and suspicious invoices. Then there was the Payroll Adjustments folder. Executive bonuses coded as operational expenses, salaries that didn't match what was reported to the state. Stock options backdated with the creativity of a fiction writer. I wasn't looking at evidence of crimes I'd always told myself that, all these years, I was looking at aggressive interpretations, gray areas, the kind of threading the needle financial creativity that every corporation practiced, right up until someone looked too closely. And unemployment claims, they make people look closely. They require verification of employment history, salary information, detailed records that get submitted to the state. The same state that has an understaffed but incredibly motivated Department of Revenue, always hungry for discrepancies that might lead to unpaid taxes, unreported income, misclassified employees. I closed the laptop and made myself dinner leftover Thai food that had been waiting for a night when I'd get home before 9 p.m. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets shining like oil slicks under the streetlights. From my window, I could see the faint glow of downtown. Stratison's tower, just another light in the constellation of corporate Seattle. They thought they were done with me, thought they'd packaged me up neat and clean. 2 weeks severance and a signed NDA, another casualty of corporate efficiency, but Graham had made one crucial error. Spoken 6 words that would unravel everything. We won't contest your unemployment claim. He'd just given me a loaded weapon and painted the target himself. I pulled out my phone and set a reminder for 9 a.m. tomorrow. File unemployment claim, Washington State Employment Security Department. Just another laid-off worker following standard procedure. Nothing vindictive, nothing personal. Just business. Graham, nothing personal. 3 days later, the letter arrived with the clinical efficiency of government machinery. Washington State Employment Security Department, their eagle logo presiding over paragraphs of bureaucratic prose. But buried in the standard language was the passage that made my pulse quicken. As part of your claim verification, your former employer will be required to provide detailed employment records, including but not limited to complete payroll records, classification status, contractor agreements for operational staff, and all compensation documentation for the period of employment. I read it twice, then a third time, savoring each word like aged wine. The state wasn't just processing my claim, they were conducting their standard audit, the kind that happens when someone with my salary level and tenure files for benefits, the kind that requires real documentation, not the sanitized HR summaries Graham expected to provide. My laptop sat open on the kitchen table, its screen dark but waiting. I'd spent the last 3 days organizing, not creating. That was the beauty of it. Every document was real, every number authentic. I wasn't fabricating evidence. I was simply ensuring the truth would be impossible to ignore. The phone rang at 11:20 a.m. Unknown number, but the 360 area code was Olympia, state government. Ms. Mitchell? This is Robert Hayward from the Employment Security Department. I'm calling about your unemployment claim. Yes? I kept my voice neutral, confused, the tone of someone who'd never filed such a claim before. We've received your initial filing, but given your position and tenure at Stratison Technologies, we need additional documentation. This is standard procedure for claims involving managerial positions. Of course. What do you need from me? Actually, Hayward paused, papers rustling on his end. We'll be requesting most documentation directly from your employer. However, if you have any personal records, pay stubs, contracts, especially anything regarding your classification status or any contractor work you might have overseen, that would be helpful. Contractor work. The words hung in the air like an invitation. I kept thorough records, I said carefully. I was in process management. Documentation was part of my job. Excellent. Can you upload those to our secure portal? I'll send you the link. Absolutely. I have everything organized by year and category. Would it be helpful if I included the contractor agreements I managed? There were quite a few, and I want to make sure you have complete information. A pause. That would be very helpful. Ms. Mitchell? Very helpful indeed. After we hung up, I sat back and looked at my screen. The secure portal link had already arrived, complete with multiple warnings about the penalties for providing false information. Perfect. Every document I was about to submit would be absolutely genuine, pulled directly from Stratison's own systems during my 8 years of legitimate access. I started with the basics, my own employment records, clean and straightforward. Then I moved to the contractor files, uploading them in meticulous order. The ghost contractors first, the ones billing 40 hours a week while maintaining independent status, then the suspicious ones, with their executive adjacent addresses and peculiar billing patterns. Finally, the Masterpiece 3 contractors who existed only on paper, whose payments went to accounts that traced back to shell companies registered in Delaware. Each file was named with boring precision: Contractor Agreement 2023 Q3. Standard PDF. Nothing inflammatory, nothing that screamed whistleblower, just a process manager's typically anal retentive filing system. Exactly what they'd expect from someone who'd spent 8 years categorizing chaos. The portal accepted each upload with a satisfied chime. 15 files, 30, 50. By the time I finished, I'd provided 18 months of contractor agreements, representing nearly $4 million in questionable payments. But I wasn't done. The portal had a section for additional documentation, with a text box asking, "Is there any other information relevant to your employment or termination?" I typed carefully. I managed contractor payments and classifications as part of my role. Some contractors worked exclusively on-site during standard business hours, which may be relevant for employment classification purposes. I've included their agreements as requested. Also, my termination came immediately after I flagged several payroll discrepancies to HR, though I was told the termination was due to restructuring. That last part was artistic license. I'd never flagged anything to HR, but they'd have to investigate the claim, have to dig through emails and records to disprove it, and in that digging, they'd find the actual discrepancies I'd been quietly documenting for years. I hit submit at 1:47 p.m., watching the progress bar crawl toward completion. Somewhere in Olympia, a government server was receiving years of corporate sins disguised as routine documentation. Some overworked auditor would open these files expecting standard employment verification, and instead find a roadmap to millions in tax fraud. The beautiful part, I wasn't the source. I was just an unemployed process manager, filing for benefits she was legally entitled to, providing documentation as requested by the state. The investigation that would follow that would come from the state's own discovery, their own analysis. I was just a good citizen, complying with a government request. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, the security guard. Heard Graham bragging about cutting 20% from operational overhead. Your whole department is gone. I'm sorry. 20%. I'd been reduced to a percentage point in someone's efficiency report, but numbers cut both ways. The ones I'd just uploaded would cut deeper than Graham could imagine. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, somewhere across the city. Graham was probably in another meeting, making another cut. Convinced he was the smartest person in the room, he had no idea that the real game had already begun, that the first domino had just been pushed by a routine government portal accepting a routine unemployment claim. Nothing personal. Graham, just business. The next week became an exercise in methodical precision. Every morning at 6 a.m., coffee in hand, I would open my laptop and refine the data architecture that would become Stratisyn's undoing. This wasn't about dumping raw files anymore. This was about creating an undeniable narrative that any investigator could follow with their eyes closed. I started with the spreadsheet, a masterpiece of organizational clarity. Column A, contractor name. Column B, official classification. Column C, actual hours. Worked on site. Column D, payment amount. Column E, payment destination. And then the crucial column F, cross-reference notes. James Richardson, independent marketing consultant, 40 hours per week on site for 18 months. Payments to an LLC registered at the same address as CFO Margaret Walsh's beach house in Cannon Beach. The LLC had been dissolved and recreated 3 times, each time just before tax season. Patricia Hernandez, freelance technical writer, who'd never written a single document but somehow billed $8,000 monthly for documentation services. Her payments went to an account that, through 3 layers of transfers I'd tracked during a particularly boring afternoon 2 years ago, ended up in Graham's wife's maiden name. Then there were the real employees misclassified as contractors to avoid paying benefits. 17 of them, saving Stratison approximately $2.3 million annually in healthcare, retirement contributions, and payroll taxes. I'd calculated it once out of curiosity. Now that calculation sat in cell G45, highlighted in pale yellow. But the spreadsheet was just the skeleton. The meat came from the supporting documents, each one meticulously named and numbered. Contract 001, Richardson 2023. PDF linked to cell A2. Payment record 001. Richardson Q1. PDF supported the data in cell D2. Cross-referenced with email correspondence /Walsh Flow. Richardson 2023 .pdf, which I'd saved during a routine server backup that was, technically, part of my job responsibilities. I wasn't hacking. I wasn't stealing. Every document had been accessible to me during my employment, saved as part of my normal workflow. Process managers keep everything. It's both our blessing and our curse. We're the corporate pack rats, the ones who archive emails just in case, who screenshot approval chains, who save every version of every document because someday someone will ask, who authorized this? The real artistry came in the pattern recognition. See, fraud isn't usually one big crime. It's 1,000 small ones that create a pattern, like the way contractor payments always spiked in the last week of each quarter, just enough to hit certain executive bonus thresholds, or how certain contractors' invoices were always approved within hours, while legitimate ones sat for weeks. Or the fascinating coincidence that every ghost contractor's tax ID traced back to the same registered agent in Delaware. At 11:15 a.m., Robert Hayward called again. Ms. Mitchell, we've reviewed your initial documentation. It's quite comprehensive. I believe in being thorough, I said, channeling 8 years of corporate speak. Yes, well, some of these contractor arrangements are raising questions. We may need additional information. Of course. What specifically would be helpful? Payment records, primarily. Also, any correspondence regarding contractor classification decisions. The Department of Revenue has been particularly interested in employment classification lately. The Department of Revenue. The word sent a thrill through me. This was no longer just about my unemployment claim. I have extensive payment records, I said, including the approval chains and classification justifications. Would you like me to organize them chronologically or by contractor? Both, if possible, Ms. Mitchell. I should inform you that this review may extend beyond just your claim verification. I understand. I'm happy to cooperate fully. After the call, I created a new folder. For WA State Review, inside, I built a timeline that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. January 2020. First ghost contractor appears. March 2020. Payments begin. June 2020. First misclassification of full-time employee as contractor. September 2020. Pattern emerges of quarterly payment spikes. December 2020. 3 ghost contractors now billing regularly. Each point on the timeline linked to supporting documents. Emails where executives discussed keeping headcount down for optics. Memos about creative staffing solutions. A particularly damning message where Graham himself, before becoming CEO, wrote, "The contractor loophole is saving us millions. Make sure it stays off the official audit radar." I included my own emails too, the ones where I'd raised concerns using careful corporate language, just wanting to confirm the classification for Richardson. Following up on the contractor versus employee distinction for tax purposes, please advise on proper documentation for these arrangements. All met with responses like, handle it as discussed, or follow standard procedure, or my favorite, from Graham. Stop overthinking this, Lauren. By 4:30 p.m., I had 347 documents organized into 17 folders, each one telling a piece of the story. The whole package came to just under 2 gigabytes, small enough to upload easily, large enough to bury Stratocin in investigations for years. I created a single PDF index, a roadmap to the labyrinth, clean, professional, with hyperlinks to each document, no editorializing, No accusations, just facts, figures, and the connecting tissue that revealed a pattern of systematic fraud dating back 4 years. The upload portal accepted it all without complaint. As the progress bar completed, I imagined it landing on some government server, waiting like a virus for the first curious auditor to open it and realize what they'd found. I leaned back and looked at my work. Years of turning a blind eye, of being complicit through silence, of telling myself it wasn't my problem, all of it reversed in a week of careful documentation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Graham had eliminated my position to save money, but the cost of defending against what was coming would dwarf my salary by a factor of hundreds. My phone buzzed. An email from the Washington State Employment Security Department. Documentation received. Under review. Under review. Such benign words for what was about to unfold. The upload confirmation sat in my inbox like a detonator waiting for its timer to expire. I closed my laptop and did something I hadn't done in 8 years. I turned off my phone and went for a walk. Seattle's University District was alive with students and coffee shops, a world that had existed parallel to my corporate prison, but might as well have been on another planet. I bought a tea from a place that didn't have a corporate account, didn't require an expense report, didn't need approval from 3 levels of management. The freedom of that small transaction felt revolutionary. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No 3 a.m. emails to check, no European markets opening that might affect quarterly reports, no ghost contractors to haunt my conscience. Just silence, rain against windows, and the knowledge that somewhere in a government building, my documentation sat like a loaded weapon with its safety off. Monday morning, 9:15 a.m., I was making breakfast when the call came. Not Hayward this time. Someone new. Ms. Mitchell. This is Catherine Moss from the Washington State Department of Revenue. I'm calling regarding documentation you provided to the Employment Security Department. The Department of Revenue, the next domino. How can I help you, Ms. Moss? We've been reviewing the contractor payment records you submitted. We have some questions about classification status and tax reporting. Would you be available for a formal interview? Formal interview. Legal speak for, we found something. Of course. When would you like to meet? Would Thursday at 10 a.m. work? Our offices are in downtown Seattle. I'll be there. Ms. Mitchell, I should advise you that you may want to bring legal counsel. Am I under investigation? No. You're being interviewed as a witness. The investigation concerns Stratison Technologies. Witness, not suspect. The distinction mattered. After the call, I opened my laptop and did something delicious. I logged into LinkedIn. Graham's profile was full of corporate victory laps. Proud to announce 20% operational savings in Q1. Streamlining for success at Stratison. Building a leaner, more efficient organization. I didn't comment, didn't react, just screenshot them all for posterity. Tuesday brought another call. This one from a number I didn't recognize. Lauren, it's Sandra, from HR. Sandra, who'd watched me sign my corporate death warrant with all the warmth of an executioner. Sandra, what can I do for you? I'm calling unofficially, completely off the record. There's no such thing as off the record with HR, but I played along. Okay. The state has been requesting documents, lots of documents, about contractors, payments, classifications. Graham is concerned. I see. Lauren, did you file a complaint? I filed for unemployment, which Graham said he wouldn't contest. That's all. But the documents they're asking for, they're very specific. They know exactly what to look for. The state is thorough, I suppose. A pause. Sandra's voice dropped. Lauren, if you have concerns about the company, there are internal channels. Sandra, I don't work there anymore. Remember, Graham eliminated my position. I have no concerns about Stratison because Stratison is no longer my concern. But if you provided documents, I complied with a state request for employment verification. Are you suggesting I should have refused to cooperate with a government agency? Silence. Then, Graham would like to discuss a revised severance package. There it was, the first sign of panic. I've already signed my severance agreement. He's prepared to be generous, very generous. That's kind of him, but unnecessary. I'm quite satisfied with our original arrangement. Lauren. Sandra, I need to go. Best of luck with the state inquiries. I hung up and immediately documented the call time, date, content, the subtle attempt at a payoff. Then I did something even better. I sent a simple email to Robert Hayward at the Employment Security Department. Mr. Hayward, I wanted to inform you that my former employer has contacted me regarding the documentation I provided to your office. They've offered to revise my severance package, which seems unusual given that we've already executed a separation agreement. I wanted to make you aware in case this is relevant to your review. I have not accepted any new offers and don't intend to. His response came within an hour. Thank you for informing us. Please document any further contact from Stratus Technologies. Your transparency is appreciated. Wednesday was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before storms. I spent it organizing my remaining documents, creating backup copies, ensuring everything was archived in multiple locations. Not because I planned to use them, the dice were already cast, but because thoroughness was a hard habit to break. That evening, Marcus texted, "Something big is happening. Graham's been in meetings all day with legal. Nobody knows what's going on, but it's not good." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't compromise the beautiful simplicity of what was unfolding. I'd pulled one thread, a simple unemployment claim, and now the entire tapestry was unraveling. Each document the state requested would lead to 3 more questions. Each question would require more documentation. And somewhere in those documents, an auditor would notice that $4 million in contractor payments had never been properly reported for tax purposes. Thursday morning arrived gray and promising rain. I put on my best interview suit, the one I'd worn to my original Stratus interview 8 years ago. It still fit perfectly, though the person wearing it had changed completely. That eager young process manager was gone, replaced by someone who understood that loyalty to a corporation was like love letters to a paper shredder. As I drove toward downtown, toward the Department of Revenue building, toward my formal interview as a witness, I thought about Graham in his glass office, probably surrounded by lawyers, trying to explain payments to people who didn't exist, trying to justify employees misclassified as contractors, trying to make the numbers add up in a way that wouldn't end with handcuffs. He'd thought he was so smart, cutting 20% from operational overhead. He just hadn't realized that I was the finger in the dam, and removing me would release a flood that would wash away everything he'd built. Nothing personal. Graham, just mathematics. 2 weeks of silence followed my interview with the Department of Revenue. 2 weeks where I imagined Stratus's executive floor transforming into a war room, lawyers billing hourly rates that would make my annual salary look like pocket change, shredders working overtime despite the futility of destroying evidence the state already possessed. Then, on a Tuesday at 2:30 p.m., the storm made landfall. Marcus texted first. 3 state auditors just walked in with boxes. Security was told to give them full access. What did you do? I didn't respond. I was busy watching LinkedIn, where Graham's victory laps had stopped cold 5 days ago. His last post about operational efficiency had aged like milk in the sun. The texts kept coming, a play-by-play from my former colleagues. They're in the server room. Graham's assistant is crying. Legal team just doubled in size, saw them setting up in conference room A. They're pulling all the contractor files. At 4 p.m., my phone rang. A Seattle number I didn't recognize. Ms. Mitchell. This is Jonathan Clark from Weinstein, Bradley, and Associates. We represent Stratus Technologies, a law firm, the expensive kind. Yes. We'd like to discuss your recent communications with state agencies. I'm listening. Our client is prepared to offer you a substantial settlement in exchange for... Mr. Clark, are you attempting to interfere with a state investigation? Silence. Because I'm fairly certain that offering money to a witness in an active investigation has a legal term. What's it called again? Obstruction. Ms. Mitchell, You misunderstand. I understand perfectly. Stratison is welcome to communicate with me through proper legal channels. Good day. I hung up and immediately forwarded the call details to Catherine Moss at the Department of Revenue. Her response was swift. Thank you. Please continue documenting all contact. BTW, you might find tomorrow's news interesting. Wednesday's Seattle Times business section led with it. State launches fraud investigation into Stratison Technologies. The article was sparse on details, but heavy on implications. Sources familiar with the investigation indicate potential tax fraud exceeding several $million related to employee misclassification and unreported payments. My phone exploded. Former colleagues, reporters, recruiters smelling blood in the water. I ignored them all except an email from someone unexpected. Lauren, this is Margaret Walsh. I'm no longer CFO at Stratison, resigned Monday. I wanted you to know that some of us tried to warn Graham about the contractors. He wouldn't listen. What's happening now was inevitable. If the investigators contact me, I won't lie for him. M. Margaret Walsh, throwing Graham under the bus to save herself. The corporate solidarity was crumbling. Thursday brought escalation. Marcus sent a photo that made me smile. Auditors wheeling out boxes of documents, each one labeled and sealed. But the real prize was his next message. Graham just got served. Not sure what, but he went white as paper. Walked out of the building at noon and hasn't come back. Friday was biblical. The local NBC affiliate led their noon broadcast with footage I would treasure forever. Graham Walters, my efficient, cost-cutting, position-eliminating former CEO, being escorted from his Bellevue home by federal agents, not arrested not yet but questioned in what the reporter called an expanding investigation into corporate tax fraud. The statement from Stratison came 3 hours later, a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. Stratison Technologies is cooperating fully with state and federal authorities regarding questions about our contractor relationships. We are confident that this review will find that the company acted within the bounds of standard business practices. Standard business practices? I actually laughed. My unemployment benefits had been approved that morning. The irony wasn't lost on me. The claim that started everything was now almost beside the point. $640 a week from the state, while Stratison hemorrhaged millions in legal fees and faced potential fines that could reach 8 figures. But the real victory came in a call from Catherine Moss on Friday afternoon. Ms. Mitchell, I wanted to thank you for your cooperation. Your documentation has been invaluable. I just provided what was requested. Yes, well, your organizational skills are impressive. Everything cross-referenced, indexed, searchable. It's rare we receive such thorough assistance. I was a process manager. Documentation was my life. I suspect you'll have plenty of opportunities once this becomes public. Companies appreciate people who maintain good records. The subtext was clear: whistleblowers who played by the rules, who used the system instead of the media, who let the government discover the crimes rather than making accusations those people had futures. Ms. Moss, can I ask you something? Of course. How bad is it for them? A pause. Let's just say that Mr. Walters' operational efficiency savings are about to be offset by approximately 10 years of unpaid taxes, penalties, and interest. And that's before we discuss the criminal charges. Criminal charges. The words hung in the air like a benediction. That evening, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine, the good stuff, not the corporate event leftovers I'd been drinking for years. My phone buzzed with news alerts. Stratison stock plunges on fraud investigation. CEO Graham Walters takes leave of absence. Federal prosecutors join Washington state tax fraud case. Each headline was a chess piece moving into position. The king was in check, his escape routes closing one by one, all from a single unemployment claim, filed by a discarded employee who knew where the bodies were buried and, more importantly, knew exactly who to tell about the cemetery. The rain started again, that steady Seattle drizzle that washes everything clean eventually. I thought about Graham, probably huddled with his lawyers, trying to explain how operational efficiency had led to federal investigation. trying to understand how removing one process manager had triggered a process that would destroy everything. But I didn't feel sympathy. He taught me the most valuable lesson of my career in corporate America. Loyalty is a luxury only the powerful can afford. The rest of us. We need leverage. And sometimes, leverage looks like a routine government form, filed at exactly the right time, with exactly the right documentation attached. Tuesday morning, 7:45 a.m. I was drinking coffee and scrolling through job postings. Funny how being unemployed had become almost recreational when you knew you'd triggered your former company's apocalypse when Marcus called. Don't answer any other calls. Just watch the news. Channel 5, now. I switched on the television to see a scene that would be burned into my memory forever. Stratison Technologies headquarters surrounded by federal vehicles. Not just auditors with boxes this time. FBI, IRS, Criminal Investigation Division, the full alphabet soup of agencies that spelled corporate doom. The reporter was breathless. We're told this morning's raid is part of a coordinated action involving multiple federal agencies. Sources indicate this is related to the ongoing tax fraud investigation, but the scope appears to have expanded significantly. Expanded. I knew what that meant.